All right, let's take a look at Resident Evil Survivor for the PS1 here. We'll throw that in, and we will turn this on, and we will turn off the lights, of course. This is an EmuVR, a great way to play light gun games, as I've shown with Virtual Cop on the Sega Saturn. So let's get into it. So for starters here, you will have to use the PAL or Japanese version of this game. The North American version does not support the light gun at all, which is strange. So here you can see we're adjusting the gun. It's actually pretty accurate, as you can see there. You will have to use the Swan Station core. If you use the default Beetle core, this won't work right. It has issues with shooting off screen, and that's how you move your character around in this game. I'll talk about that a little bit more. We'll start the game here.
Survivor. In 1998, a disaster struck the quiet Midwestern residents of Raccoon City. An uncontrollable outbreak of the Umbrella-created T-virus transformed the city into an inescapable death trap. To stop the outbreak from spreading, Umbrella Incorporated was forced to wipe out the entire city. However, this was not the only location where an outbreak occurred.
You're not going to get away.
Where am I? Oh! I don't remember anything. Who am I?
So you will have to recalibrate the gun once you get into the game. I know this sounds weird, but if you don't do this, the game doesn't really seem to care when you shoot off screen. Like, you'll fire your gun instead of walking forward. So you've got to press A, B, and the trigger, or all three buttons on the gun con at the same time to bring up a special menu and recalibrate the gun again. I know it sounds weird. Again, you just calibrate it at the beginning of the game, but once you're in the game, you've got to do it again. Now that we're moving around, the controls in this game are either all done with a controller or all done with the light gun. So when you're using the light gun, you have to use the light gun to move around, which is a little strange. This is not an on-rails shooter. This is a game where you actually have to move around and control your character in the world. And again, you do that all with the light gun. So we've got 2 buttons on the end of the gun con. The light gun for the PS1, the Namco gun con specifically. 2 buttons on the left and right side of the gun, and that makes you turn left and right. And then, again, to move forward, you hold the trigger while you're pointing the gun off the screen, and your character will walk forward. If you actually double tap the trigger, the character will run, although I found that's a little picky. It doesn't always work, but it usually works. Controls in this game in general work fine most of the time, but sometimes it's hard to get the menu up, pressing A or B at the same time. Sometimes it kind of acts as if button A or B got stuck down. So when you come into a menu, the menu like options might be just flying by, or sometimes when you come out of a menu, your character will just be like spinning in a circle. And I find that if you quickly press like if it's acting as if A is stuck down and you press B, it will unstick A. This is obviously an issue with the emulation. The emulation just isn't perfect. But again, it's much better here than it was in Beetle. In Beetle, just getting your character to walk forward was a bit of a chore. As again, it just didn't act right when you were aiming off the screen. A lot of times my character would want to walk backwards when I was telling him to walk forwards. That would happen quite often. Again, switching to the Swan Station core in the EmuVR game selector. So when you go into the game selector and you go to your PS1 light gun, you can click the little options menu and change it to Swan Station. Again, it will be on Beetle by default. This game does have branching paths, which is pretty cool. I didn't know that, obviously, my first time playing this game. This is actually only my second time ever playing this game. And in this playthrough, I did, take some different routes, and, I saw some new areas and new settings that I had never seen before. So that's kind of cool. In this game, you can't really save. At first, I thought that was weird, like I was waiting to find a save room, perhaps. I noticed at the main menu, like there was an option to continue or start a new game. But basically, you have to beat this game in one go. If you die and don't continue, I believe if you turn the game off and then start later, that's when you have like almost like a load. But it only saves like items. It doesn't save your progress. So I'm guessing you have to start over, but you'll have all your items. So that's a little weird. Again, I'm not 100% sure how this works, but basically you have to beat this game in one sitting. That said, this game's only like a 2 to 3 hour game. It's not super long. But again, you got to beat it all in one sitting. Again, this is an arcade game. This is an arcade shooter. But unlike most arcade shooters, it's not an on-rail shooter. I actually really like the concept of this game. You can move around in full 3D with full control, and again, if you're just playing with the controller, the moving around part's probably fine. But then the shooting part's going to suck, and that's kind of where this game starts to fall apart. The North American version of this game doesn't support the light gun at all, which is just bizarre. I think this game came out right around the time Columbine happened, and there was some weird things happening with light gun games at that time. If you recall, when the Dreamcast launched in North America at the end of 1999, they didn't release the official Sega light gun for it. There was aftermarket third-party light guns, but you couldn't buy the official Sega light gun for the Dreamcast in North America. And again, I think this game was also a bit of an unfortunate circumstance of Columbine happening around this time. I believe this game came out in 2000. It was a late PS1 game. It might have been late 1999 or 2000. But again, the North American version of this game doesn't have light gun support at all. You have to use the European version or the Japanese version. I'm using the European version, like I said, meaning we've got light gun support, but again, you use the light gun for everything, meaning you use the light gun to move your character forward and turn. If this game let you use a controller and a light gun at the same time, it would have been absolutely sick. Just imagine holding the controller in your left hand, using it to move around with the D-pad, while shooting with the gun in your right hand. You would be able to move around while shooting, which is something you can't really do in this one. And it would have just made for a really awesome experience, unlike really anything else I can think of on the consoles at the time. I'm not even sure if that's possible. Like, did other PS1 games use a controller and the gun con at the same time? I mean, it just seems like so obvious here, but otherwise it feels like it's kind of lacking. The game is okay. Again, it's a typical arcade light gun shooter, but it's a light gun shooter that doesn't support the light gun in one of its major, territory releases. And it's a light gun game where if you are using the light gun, you have to use the light gun to move around. It's a little strange, but it could have been awesome. The concept of this game is great. I like the atmosphere. I like the fact you got to move around. Having a Resident Evil game in first person, moving around, is kind of cool. The game doesn't have very much replay value, I would say, aside from the few branching paths. I'm not really sure how many branching paths there are, and I think for me in this gameplay, once I branched off one way, I had to branch off a second way. So again, I'm not sure how many, the branching paths might only give you like a couple different, ways to go through the game. I'm not sure. But I really think this is a decent game that could have been awesome if only you could have used the controller and a light gun at the same time. The concept of the game is awesome. It's just a little weird, playing a light gun game with a controller, which is how you had to play it in North America, or playing, a first-person, 3D game where you move your character around with a light gun. Like, either one of those options is weird, and if they would have just combined the two, it would have been outstanding. Like, this would have been really, really cool if you could move around with the D-pad, move around the controller while shooting with the gun at the same time. Again, would that have been possible? I'm not sure, but it would have been awesome. Anyways, guys, that's it for Resident Evil Survivor. Again, I kind of like this game, and I know this game gets a lot of hate. Like, this game's the butt of a lot of jokes, and a lot of people like to make fun of this game. I actually think this is a really cool game. Having an arcade-like shooter in the Resident Evil world, trying something different, it just didn't quite pull it off. But it could have. And if it did, it would have been awesome. This game would have been sick. Again, as it stands, it's okay. I think this game is okay. Is the voice acting and the cutscenes cheesy? Yes. Cheesier than in any other Resident Evil game? Yes. Cheesier than Resident Evil 1's voice acting, hands down. But again, it's an arcade game, so it has a feel of like Sega's House of the Dead. Very arcade driven, super cheesy cutscenes and cheesy voice acting. But I kind of like it. I don't mind it. Again, I just like the atmosphere and the fact you can move around in this kind of Resident Evil-like environment. Again, this game, I kind of like this game. I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. And if they would have nailed the controls, it would have been awesome. Anyways, that's it. See you guys later.